Welcome back to day 2. I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to put some of the knowledge that you learned in the first module to good use. We're going to talk about activities that you commonly do throughout the day that can affect your sleep at night. These include drinking alcohol or caffeine, napping, your exposure to light, as well as exercise. All of these affect our sleep differently, so it's going to be important for you to take some notes today. My goal for you today is that you complete the day feeling like you understand how these activities can either improve your sleep and productivity or take away from it. I'll also give you some useful tools and tips to limit the harmful effects of alcohol and caffeine consumption so that you never have to give them up. I'd like to start today by telling you about one of my patients, Dr. Jane. When I first started my practice, I was walking around the medical building I was in and introducing myself to all of the other doctors. This is a very common practice. Since you're so close by, many times the other docs will send over referrals if they know you and your practice is located in the same building. I went into an internist's office who was actually a geriatric specialist. When she met me, she said, "I sleep like hell. If you can fix my sleep, I will send you all the patients you could ever hope for." I turned to her and I said, "Challenge accepted." When Jane completed her interview with me, I was actually a little shocked. Here was her routine. She would work from 7 in the morning until 7 at night. She would order food on the ride home to be delivered or just pick something up along the way. She would arrive at home and immediately pour her first glass of wine. She would get in her bed with her dinner and all of her work for the night or reading that she needed to do. And she would then spend hours reading, eating, and drinking wine. By 11 or so, she would take a sleeping pill, usually double the dose, and a Benadryl with her wine and go to bed. She would wake up in the middle of the night and then eat 3 to 4 Benadryls by chewing them, thinking that they would help faster, then in some cases take a second sleeping pill. She told me that she would alternate between sleeping pills. When one would become less effective, she would switch to another. She would wake at 6 a.m. only with 3 snoozes, drink 2 cups of coffee while at home, and 1 on the way to work. While she was at work, she would have a steady stream of coffee in the morning and all the way through lunch. She would often skip lunch, not hungry from all the coffee, and snack on whatever was around the office. When she was not too far behind in her schedule, she would close her door and nap whenever she could. She had quit exercising because she was simply too exhausted. As you can see from Dr. Jane's story, what we do during the day affects our ability to sleep at night. It's really that simple. Our nutrition, movement, habits, and thoughts can have a huge impact on our ability to shut down our mind at night for a restful sleep. The big goal of today is to empower you to start somewhere that's easy that will have a big effect. Because the choices you make during the day are going to have a big impact on how restorative your sleep is at night. Don't get overwhelmed. I don't expect you to make all of these changes at once. If you can only make one change per week, then that's a great place to start. Let's start with a compound that is consumed by nearly 90% of the United States population and can have a dramatic effect on our sleep: alcohol. Believe it or not, alcohol is the most common sleep aid in the world. At least 20% of American adults rely on it for helping them fall asleep every night. But the truth is, drinking regularly, even moderate drinking, is much more likely to interfere with your sleep than it is to assist it. Does this mean you need to abstain from drinking altogether? No, not at all. But part of a sleep-friendly lifestyle is managing alcohol consumption so that it doesn't disrupt your sleep or your circadian rhythms. Before we look at the effects of alcohol on sleep in detail, here's the basic bottom line. The more you drink, and the closer your drinking is to bedtime, the more it will negatively impact your sleep. Even moderate amounts of alcohol in your system at bedtime alters the natural flow of sleep through the different stages. Alcohol also leads to lighter, more restless sleep as the night wears on, reduced sleep quality, and increased next day fatigue. A lot of people say to me, "But alcohol is the only thing that makes me fall asleep." And to be fair, it's true. Sleep may happen more quickly after consuming a drink or two. But also, to be clear, alcohol reduces the time it takes to fall asleep, but there's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out. As you drink alcohol more and more, we quickly build a tolerance for the sedative effects of alcohol, which means you may need to even drink more to have that initial sleep-inducing effect. Here's what happens in a little more detail. In the first half of the night, when the body is metabolizing alcohol, studies show that people spend more time in deep, slow-wave sleep and less time in REM sleep. You might be thinking, "Hey, this sounds like a good idea to spend more time in deep sleep." Not so fast. Changes to the natural, typical structure of sleep aren't generally good for health or for well-being. REM sleep, which gets reduced in the first half of the night under the influence of alcohol, is important for mental restoration, including memory and emotional processing. During the second half of the night, After you drink the alcohol too close to bedtime, sleep becomes more disrupted. As alcohol is metabolized and any of its sleepy effects reduce, the body undergoes what scientists call a rebound effect. This includes moving from deeper to lighter sleep and having more frequent awakenings during the second half of the night. These may be micro awakenings that you don't even remember, but they still interrupt the flow as well as the quality of your sleep. During the second half of the night, sleep architecture shifts again away from normal with less time spent in slow wave sleep. The rebound effect may include more time in REM, which the body may not be ready for. People who go to bed with alcohol in their system may be more likely to wake early in the morning and not be able to fall back asleep, another consequence of the rebound effect. What's fascinating is that there seems to be a gender difference in the terms of alcohol and how it affects sleep. Research shows that women appear to experience the sleep-disrupting impact of alcohol more significantly than men do. So the big question has got to be, how much is too much when it comes to sleep? As it turns out, this is a very simple question to answer. Most people don't know this, but it takes the average human body approximately 1 hour to digest one alcoholic beverage. Keeping this in mind, there are 2 rules for drinking and sleeping. Number 1, if you drink, you need to consume 1 glass of water for each alcoholic beverage. This actually does 2 things. Number 1, it slows down the amount of alcohol that you ingest due to just the volume of fluid in your system. In addition, it keeps you hydrated. Remember, alcohol is a diuretic. Next, I want you to count from your bedtime backwards 1 hour per number of drinks you had, and this becomes your cutoff time. For example, if your bedtime is 11 p.m. and you generally enjoy 2 glasses of wine at dinner, then you subtract 2 from 11, and that tells you that you need to stop drinking alcohol by 9 p.m. If you're not interested in doing the math, then I usually tell people if they just stop 3 hours before lights out, they should be just fine. While alcohol is a depressant to the nervous system, there are also stimulants that have a more obvious effect on our sleep due to their energizing properties. That brings us to the most widely abused drug in the world, caffeine. We all have our favorite caffeine products. Yours might be a thick, foamy espresso or a strong cup of Earl Grey tea or even an energy drink. Personally, I like a good cup of black coffee made with a French press. But one way or another, most people feel like they need caffeine on a daily basis. An estimated 80% of American adults consume caffeine in one form or another every day. Caffeine's most recognizable effect is usually an increase in alertness and wakefulness. It also creates a short-term elevation in your blood pressure, which can make it difficult to achieve or maintain sleep. Most importantly, caffeine blocks adenosine, that neurochemical that increases in the body throughout the day, heading to sleepiness. By blocking adenosine, we reduce the body's ability to become sleepy. Caffeine also increases our motivation neurotransmitter dopamine. Dopamine is a neurochemical that activates the pleasure centers of the brain. Caffeine increases dopamine similar to the way that amphetamines do. This increases alertness and also may be part of what makes caffeine so habit-forming. One of the big ways that caffeine disrupts your natural sleep cycle is by decreasing melatonin. For those of you who don't know, remember melatonin is that sleep hormone. It's kind of like the key that starts the engine for sleep. It's not the only thing that you need, but it's one of the most important hormones and you can't start sleep without it. It might surprise you to hear, but caffeine has an even stronger influence on melatonin suppression than bright light. Caffeine also hangs in our system for a really long time. Did you know it takes almost 8 hours for the concentration of caffeine floating around in our bodies to be reduced by half? So how much caffeine is too much caffeine? When considering how much caffeine is too much, we've got to consider that we don't all respond to caffeine exactly the same way. Some of us are more sensitive than others. For healthy adults, the FDA recommends no more than 400 milligrams of caffeine a day. This feels like a lot of caffeine to me though. That's roughly 4 6-ounce cups of coffee. The big thing to remember about caffeine is that small doses at multiple intervals will give you the biggest bang for your buck. So consider a small cup of coffee about 90 minutes after you wake up for your first dose. Then look for a second one around 11:30 if needed. And I also recommend that you stop consuming caffeine before about 2 p.m. since it hangs out in our bodies so long. But do yourself a favor, don't try to go cold turkey though. Reducing caffeine intake slowly helps reduce the withdrawal effects that you might experience. With that said, my goal for you in this course is not to need caffeine. If your sleep is dialed in, then you really shouldn't rely on caffeine to wake you up in the mornings. A sign of restorative, healthy sleep is to wake up 5 minutes before your alarm with a clear head ready to tackle the world.